we decided to make a cabin-based horror movie which would play with generic conventions but subvert your expectations and just keep surprising you and swapping things around. And so we started writing it. The first two drafts, there wasn't even a Mima. There was a demon called Barbicifet, who they called Barbie because they could never pronounce his name.
This is Opening Kill. The following program contains mature content, explicit language, and detailed discussion of on-screen deaths. Spoilers are unavoidable. Listener discretion is advised.
And welcome to episode 61 of the Opening Kill podcast. I'm Brian O'Connor.
And I am Michael Duran, as always.
You always are Michael Duran, aren't you?
I always am, always will be. Fingers crossed that doesn't change, but no, it's a crazy world we live in. Who's to say?
It definitely is. So, Michael and I are going to do something a little bit different for you horror fans this week. Independent horror is where some of the most creative filmmaking happens. And today we are talking with a director who proves exactly that. His new horror comedy, Weekend at the End of the World, was made for $300,000. But I'm going to tell you, the scale and effects look like something that cost way more than that. And the film also features one of my favorite comedic actors, Thomas Lennon. I am a huge Reno 911 fan, and when I found out Lieutenant Jim Dangle was in this cast, I just about fell over. So it's just fantastic. And Michael and I were lucky enough to be able to watch the entire film ahead of its release, and we had a blast with it. So without further ado, joining us now is the director of Weekend at the End of the World, Gille Klabin. Gille, welcome to Opening Kill. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So before we dive into the filmmaking side of things, for listeners who haven't heard about the movie yet, kind of give us the spoiler-free elevator pitch for Weekend at the End of the World.
So I'm trying to think that abbreviating it is not one of my strong suits, but I think what we've landed on is two idiot lifelong best friends who couldn't hold down a job or a relationship find themselves with an opportunity to flip one of their deceased grandmother's cabin in the hopes of becoming rich, and the only thing that stands in their way is the end of the world.
Indeed,
is that too cryptic?
No, that's good.
I could say
that's
something
perfect
about the movie outside of the characters.
That's perfect. That kind of just whets your appetite a little bit. Speaking of the characters, though, so when you first start developing a film, specifically this one, what comes first? Was it the concept, or did you kind of come up with these fun characters and then build around them?
So I feel like to me, at least, there's no uniform sort of conception of an idea. This specific project was born out of the fact that Clay Elliott, who's co-writer and he plays Carl, we had made some short films together. They're very sketch based, and I've been calling him my secret weapon for years. I've been very fortunate to work with some A-list Hollywood talent who are incredible actors, and I work with Clay, and I'm like, oh, that's the same skill set. That's the same human explosion that you can capture, that has enough control that you can capture them on screen. And we were doing all these shorts, and we were approaching 40 at the time, and I think Clay was about ready to throw in the towel. And I said, yeah, I just released my first film, and I was sort of frustrated with the process of waiting the years it takes to make another movie. And I'm a camera and VFX nerd, and I have all the gear, and I have the willingness to shave years off my life making movies. So I said, we should lean into what we can do, which is a story based around you, and lean into the things that we do really well together, which is comedies with heart, and also the fact that I'm a sucker for cool visuals. And so we decided to write a feature that we could theoretically pull off for no money, just using what we had available to us. And Spencer, who we were co-writing with as well, around the time we had just shot this sketch, and their improv together was so that sort of obligatory lifelong best friend. They had this dry, predatory, but loving rapport. And we wanted to make a movie that would be controllable and small and could be a great platform to really capture some insane improv. And Clay's family, he's from California, and they have a cabin up in Pinecrest, which is about 6 hours north. So he was like, all right, look, we have this cabin. We have myself and Spencer at the time. We hoped he was going to be in it. He ended up moving up to Iowa. So we wanted to write a story that we could shoot in very limited locations, that we could do for free, and then I could lean into visuals and try to make it bigger than what it, had any right to be. And my experience with my first film on the festival circuit really showed me that like the genre film audience is so ravenous and so pure in their love of movies and the experience of watching movies. So I told Clay, I was like, look, I think we need to lean into the genre. Our strengths is like visuals and comedy, but genre is where you can really, people will give you a shot. And rather than just like a straight comedy, which is a little harder. And also it's like, just a straight comedy, it's a little harder to warrant bloating the visuals with, crazy things.
Yeah.
And my big thing as well is I get terribly bored of movies when I know what's going to happen next or when things feel too familiar. So we decided to make a cabin-based horror movie which would play with generic conventions but subvert your expectations and just keep surprising you and swapping things around. And so we started writing it. The first two drafts, there wasn't even a Mima. There was a demon called Barbicifet, who they called Barbie because they could never pronounce his name. And the product just kept going and going. And soon, the more people we gave it to, the more we started getting this uniform reaction of, don't just rush and shoot this on the weekends. Like you should really give this thing its day in court. And yeah, I mean, that's an incredibly long answer for how this film came to be, but it just had a very, very specific trajectory of, sort of took on a life of its own once we basically just tried to work in the sandbox that was afforded to us.
Right. So that's where the original concept then came from. Did it evolve over time? I mean, you said that, obviously things change from the time you start writing it to when, you shoot it. How much of it did change? Quite a bit, would you think? Or?
I mean, yeah, we shot draft 16 of the script.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, at first, at the very first, it was just like a gateway to something hellish. And, we wrote the allness scenes based on locations around Clay's family cabin. And this is like a tiny little cabin built by his granddad. So there was like a stream. So we based that stream based on a stream he had access to. There was a cave he knew he had access to. So these things evolved in that regard. And then once Mimo came into the picture, and I'm just a firm believer of once you spend enough time in a script, it sort of starts, a friend of mine, co-writer, phrased it very well. It's like it starts breathing on its own.
Right.
Slowly, these characters, the more time we spent in them, the more humanity and complexity started revealing itself. Even in a very silly, frivolous movie, like Miles's insecurities and sort of the reasons why he does what he does, the reasons why their friendship is the way it is, the sort of the quick esoteric jokes that exist between them that kind of cement this concept of a life of friendship. These things, they start germinating. And yeah, it's hard. It'd be an interesting thing to see like where these things really took their turn. I think by draft 7-ish, we were in the ballpark of what you see on screen now. And then, the next 9 drafts was refining, truncating, tying things together, really like wrapping up what Mimo's MO is. We had a table read and a friend of mine read Hank, and it was just so outrageously funny that we expanded Hank's role. And then, like when we did the table read with Thomas Lennon, he was reading Hank and he was doing the sort of in between possessed and real life. He was doing it so weird and guttural. And I remember he said to us, he's like, look, I think it would be more fun if I was really stuck in not being able to speak full sentences. And I was like, well, you're Thomas Lennon, so if you want to do it,
Yeah.
right on, man. Like,
Yeah.
he certainly wasn't there for the money. So he wanted to have more fun, and sure enough, it was great. I mean, he cut probably 60% of the lines he had in the movie as a result. But it led to a much funnier, more memorable character, and it was just great. It's everybody who works in film has worked on plenty of jobs that are not fun, but
Yeah.
this was a real family show and a really, really good time. And yeah, I'm all over the place, obviously, because I'm sleep deprived and I have a baby, and I've been making all the social media assets for this movie. But yeah, did that answer your
Dude,
question? That time will tell.
Yeah, it did.
and dude, like I feel you. I've got 2 kids of my own. Youngest is 1, and my oldest has just turned 3, and both of them are on a sleep, like, don't want to do it. Nighttime has been hell, so hang in there.
And it's illegal to
doesn't get
put them
better.
outside, you know?
Yes,
I
it
know.
is.
You can't even build a doghouse. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I've got all this gaffer tape from shoots, and I can't gaffer tape a child to anything. What is the point?
So many rules. It's just bullshit, man.
Mm.
So there's a ton of comedy, and the dialogue is incredible, first off. And it really took me back. I was watching it, and you can tell these characters are old friends, because this is exactly when my childhood friends and I get together. This is exactly how we're talking. So it just really set the stage there, specifically with the comedy. And with horror comedy, when do you decide, oh, this scene, we need to lean further into the comedy, or, hey, I think we need to really lean into the horror here? How do you kind of make those calls?
To me, I've been calling it yo-yoing. Like, you send them down, you spin them into one mood, and then you yank them up to the other mood. But I think it's the same as editing, right? When you're not editing a music video, you're just in a shot, and there's just a moment where you just hit pause. You're like, that's where I cut. And to me, it is very much an organic feel, and it's iterative, right? Like, you read it a bunch of times and you're like, okay, wow, we've really been just masturbating the comedy here for an unreasonable amount of time. Let's break it up. Let's break up attention. And for me, and I imagine the rest of the world with, a finite attention span, like, once you do your business, once you hit, like, it's like when somebody's giving you really good advice, you go, damn, that's really, really good advice. And then their immediate instinct is to, like, repeat their point again and again. It's like, no,
Right.
you nailed it. And I'm guilty of that too. So for me, it's largely a feel. It's like a breath. I want you to be like tense, 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 tense. And then the joke comes in and you exhale and you didn't realize that your entire body has been seizing in a contortion. Or it's laughter, laughter, laughter. You just get comfortable and then boom, you just yank it in the other way. And a lot of that is dictated by my own attention span or my own desire to have my expectations subverted or to be surprised. But then there's also just the collaborative nature of it where, like we've definitely had screenings of early cuts where people will tell me, like, hey, Gil, you need to calm down. Like, it's moving way too fast. Or you may think these jokes aren't funny because you've seen every pixel that make them up. But to somebody who's just stepping into this movie, like, that's actually very funny. Let that joke breathe.
Right.
Which I'm usually quite reluctant to do. But yeah, I think it's an organic thing, and I'm sure sometimes we failed, but I do feel generally, I've gotten over the years pretty good, and with Lana Wolverton, my editor, we've gotten pretty good at spinning out that yo-yo and yanking it up, both in horror and in comedy. And the two really work well to highlight one another. Their contrast and juxtaposition are so useful because, like, shock and fear is the antithesis to laughter and, like, letting loose.
Yep.
And so if the funny is really funny, the scary, even if it in isolation in a vacuum isn't that scary, but when placed right next to that funny is, like, sends your stomach into your lungs. It's just full body seizure. So there's just a lot of fun at play.
Mm-hmm. We are visiting with the producer, writer, and director of Weekend at the End of the World, Gille Klabin. The movie comes out next month in April. Were there any films that influenced the tone or the style of this movie?
We had a lot of conversations about tone and style because a huge thing to me is stakes. Mm-hmm. And we knew it was going to be silly. we comedy was certainly the North Star on this. And that's what led to, like, we did multiple passes where it was just like horror. Like, where do we put in scares, and are they informed by the story? And inevitably, certain films came up that really, in our minds, like, married the two together quite beautifully and kept emotional stakes, even when they took, suspended disbelief departures from logical reality. And I think for me personally, having grown up in England, the biggest one was Shaun of the Dead, um, which is such a stylish, you know, men in a state of arrested development, having this growing moment buddy movie set in a genuine zombie apocalypse that never felt trite. The stakes never felt small or dismissible. And so that one for me tonally was amazing. Tucker and Dale versus Evil was good, because that was a very silly movie, but also, like, the kills were severe, the gore was extreme, the fear was there. And another one which I think is probably tonally more of a departure, probably largely because of budget, but like Cabin in the Woods. I just remember the first time I saw the title card that comes on with that scream when they're just having, Bradley Whitford is just having this pedestrian conversation in the hallway, and something like, Cabin in the Woods. I was like, fucking hell, that's so bold and stylish. And I felt like I was in the hands of a good filmmaker. I was being taken on a ride in a competent and, like, just dripping in style fashion. So those were the three big ones for us.
You mentioned style, and I just want to say there's so much style in this movie, like specifically with like the color palette when shit's kind of like hitting the fan. I was eating that up. I was loving it.
Oh, thanks, man.
And speaking of when shit's hitting the fan, it looks really fucking impressive for the budget that you had. How did you manage to kind of like stretch your means to make some of these shots happen? Because it's incredible.
Effects are expensive if you're paying somebody, but I did them all for free.
Right.
So but it's my name on the box at the end of the day. So, like, and also I love it. Like, of course I love it. That's why I got into doing this. But I mean, look, I didn't go to school for visual effects, and for better or for worse, and oftentimes for worse. But I've been doing nothing but making, films, music videos, documentaries, commercials for 23, 24 years. And you build up a skill set over the years, and then every job you do teaches you a little bit, and you apply it to the situation. So I definitely had a lot of plans going into it of how I was going to pull things off. And then there was also a lot of discovery that happened once we shot. So, like, when they're in the allness, when they're in this other dimension, I wanted there to be this kind of like breathing, moving texture to everything in the world. And what that essentially boiled down to is I had to roto them out, right? I had to cut the characters out, including their messy hair and blood and mud, against trees. And we shot in September, October, so stuff was pretty dry in California, so it's a lot of skin tone. So that was an absolute nightmare. But then once I've got them there, now I've got a background that I can manipulate, sort of as I see fit, without straining too hard. And like, I'm a sucker for big kinetic camera moves, but there was a lot of shots in this movie that are pretty static and controlled, just because I knew that there was nobody coming to save the day. It was going to be me. So instead of having some big glorious camera move, I instead had to rely on really great acting, really great dialogue, great lighting, and a relatively stationary camera, so that I stood a chance in being able to isolate elements and add surrealism and extreme stuff to most of it. But, like, the lion's share of the allness look is a plugin that comes with After Effects. It's called Vector Blur. And all I did is I would isolate all the elements. So I'd cut the guys out, and I'm just applying it to the background now. And I would set keyframes on the wheel, and I would go from, like, I believe it was like from -12 to +18. Oof. And I would Bezier. So I would just be like going, and it would slow as it gets to one end, and then slow as it gets to the other end. And I would ride that out relative to how fast the shot was. So if we were living in that shot for a while, like, when they're walking up the hill with the tub of blood and singing harmonies and he sees that he's on his phone, that's a long, sustained, wide shot. So
Yeah,
on that
right.
one, I could really afford to just let those trees dance and breathe. And honestly, if you
Oh.
look at the edges of stuff, there's a lot of fuckery. But because, because you're in this weird world that is meant to be a realm between realities, that was a decision made on the front end because I knew it was just going to be me. So I was like, how do I phrase this world where it can feel otherworldly, not feel too cheap, but you buy a lot of forgiveness for the fact that it is just going to be one masochist at his computer just melting his graphics card.
Right. Well, and so when I watched this, I didn't do any preparation. I didn't go on IMDb. I didn't know what the budget was. I didn't know. I just wanted
Perfect.
to be open and watch it. And so when I did finally, after I watched it and loved it, I went back to get, all the stats to see how much money was spent on it. And that's what blew me away, that it was only $300,000 because the effects really are so well done. And then I
Oh,
read
man.
that you actually did them yourself. And I was wondering what your background with effects were. And there it is. So I think, just being a filmmaker and, you said, you've done a lot of low budget music videos and you've been doing this for quite a while. So it's just something you learn and you apply, and you did it very
I'm
well in this movie.
I'm very, very flattered. I feel like I set up a world, a tone of the movie where you could get away with a bit of kitsch. Like there were, I think the version of the portal that I really kept in the movie is V7. So there was 6 versions prior, and some of them looked more photorealistic. And in isolation, I was like, damn, that's cool. That's a cool frame. But I was like, yeah, but it doesn't work with the silly of the movie. So,
right.
I went back and forth and landed on these things. But also, shout out to all the 13-year-olds making tutorials on YouTube,
Oh,
because
yes.
I mean, I'm talking
Yes.
literally, I watched 20 different tutorials of different methodologies for making a portal, and loads had their benefits, loads had their shortcomings. I went into Blender. I watched Blender tutorials on how to make portals and all that kind of stuff, and it's, each one had its benefit and shortcoming. And some people can teach you something in 3 minutes, and another person will spend 21 minutes enjoying their presence on camera. And you're like, Jesus, man, I've got a whole movie to do. You have to talk quicker.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so you learn every time I got to a mouse click and I didn't have an answer, I would simply go on YouTube and let the community poke me along.
I
Right.
love that. And I also use YouTube for so much stuff in my day to day. You're like,
Damn straight, man.
you have a problem? YouTube can help solve that problem, man.
Right.
So is there a specific either shot or sequence in the film that was like keeping you up at night, making you tear your hair out, like just incredibly difficult?
From a visual perspective, visual effects
Yeah.
perspective?
Yep.
Christ, a bunch. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some stuff where, like the cameras, when Miles comes back into the room and he's dressed like the, as we call, dapper child molester, and then the portal opens and then we whip over. Like, there's a lot of things you can do with your camera to give your tracking points more data for you to hold on to, right? You can open your lens up, you can really give it most info, but there's only so far you can go before you're just completely demolishing your shot. So whip panning over, the pace of the scene is more important than me having everything I need as the VFX artist.
Right.
So there were definitely plenty of, well, particularly that one where portal appears, we whip over, and it's still, if you watch it now, especially with me having, given this preamble for it, it's not ideal, it's not great. So that was tough, but honestly, cutting their hair out against a dry forest,
Yeah.
when they first start tripping, when they get across the stream, you're talking about guys going in and out of your focal plane with messy wood-colored hair against trees that are out of focus.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Thank God for roto brush amongst many other tools, but
Sure.
that was rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
So
that one hurt.
on the flip side of that, was there a moment where something actually came together right away and you thought, oh fuck, this is actually going to look great?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, very very much so. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's a lot of photogrammetry apps you can get on your phone, right? So like Polycam, for example, is a big favorite of mine. But like you can scan around an object and it'll create a 3D object that you can then put into 3D software. So I knew I wanted something larger than what we could ever dream of capturing in our movie for when they first go through the portal. And we shot this entire movie in 12 days, 12-hour days, never went into overtime. So I knew that I was never going to be able to realistically, in real life, capture something where I could do something truly like, bombastic, just like moving lights around, doing all sorts without eating into the days where we had to capture more important stuff. So what I did is once I had Clay, who played Carl, he was in makeup with all the blood and stuff, I took him outside and it was in the middle of a heat wave. I think it was 105 degrees.
Oh.
And he stood there in his hoodie, locking his facial expression. And I walked around him. And granted, it took about 3 minutes, but I would move around him and go, okay, you keep your eyes closed, keep your eyes closed. And I'm on your face, open them. So he would have to keep his eyes completely open as I scanned his face, keeping it all still. And then I'd be like, and I'm gone. So he could close his eyes and blink. And I got a 3D model of him.
Okay.
And then I took that 3D model into Blender and I machine made like a cylinder and I gave it a displacement map and I made it move around. And I took him and I was like, and I didn't know how to do this stuff. I just knew that I could play with the 3D model and without the ticking clock of the shoot, I would be free to explore YouTube or essentially button mash, the expression from video games. Like essentially like I'm going to go into all the displacement tools in Blender and see which one looks cool. And so I did that with him. And then I did it again with Miles, with Cameron 5. And I had these two models of them, like it was like a bust, like chest up in their costume with their facial expressions. And I had these two models that I could put into this world. And we had no right for it to work as well as it did, but it allowed us to make this gnarly, surreal transition into another world that, for me personally, I feel like it elevates the scene. And, I hope people agree, but more importantly, I had a blast doing it.
Right. Weekend at the End of the World is the movie we're talking about. It comes out in April, and we are joined with the producer, writer, and director of the movie, Gille Klabin. And we have to talk about Thomas Lennon because he's such a fantastic comedic actor. I am a huge, huge Thomas Lennon fan. From Reno 911 and even some of the previous things he did until now. And so again, as I mentioned, I didn't know he was in this until his name popped up on the opening credits. And I'm like, holy shit, he got Thomas Lennon in this film. This is going to be
That was my reaction when we found out. I was like, holy shit, we got Thomas Lennon?
So how did you land him in this project?
That's wild. So Cameron 5, who plays Miles, is a writer and director in his own right. And he wrote and directed a movie and Thomas was cast on it. And I think they'd only worked together for 2 days, but Thomas he just loves doing this. He loves working and not working as in like in the pursuit of earning money. He just likes making. He likes making stuff. Like he's one of those people who has not forgotten that this is, in many ways the most fun you could possibly have. And so he told Cameron, he was like, hey man, if you ever want me on something, just hit me up. Like I'm always flexible and I'm not like chasing a big paycheck all the time. And Cameron had gotten him on some table reads and all sorts of stuff in the past. And Cameron pitched him to Clay and I was like, yeah, man, but like, should we not maybe approach somebody more realistic? Like this is, we don't have money. It's like, what's the point? It's like, just. So, and he was like, no, he's really, really down. And I remember shortly afterwards, Cameron sent Clay and I a screen grab, and it is Cameron's email to Thomas where he talks about the project. And then it says 2 minutes later, email received from Thomas Lennon says, "I'm in." We're like, "What do you mean you're in? You haven't even read the script. Like, you know Cameron, but you know he's not going to be doing this alone." So he was great, and then he read the script and he really liked it, and he showed up, and he was just such a joy. I mean, the guy's written books about screenwriting. He's America's darling. I mean, he's incredible. And
Yeah.
I remember our first table read with him. He sat down and somebody would read a line, and Thomas would chuckle, and Clay and I would just look at each other and be like, "Thomas fucking Lennon just laughed at our joke."
Yes.
Like,
yes.
And then he gave suggestions, and the suggestions were dynamite. And then on set, he would do things. He would just come up with stuff. And of course, it was amazing. And then we sent him early cuts, and his editing ideas were amazing. And he has given so much to this project in such a pure, idealistic way. Just sort of like, we're making movies. It's really, really fun. If you guys are all striving to make this as good as possible and there's no egos in the way, then I'm down. And it's a lot of these suggestions, like, nobody will know when they're watching the movie. They won't know that, like, oh, that only worked because Thomas Lennon suggested it. Like, short of a director's commentary of just me being like, yeah, that moment. And now this one too. Yeah, that's him. That's all him. He was just the picture of collaboration, and so funny. And I mean, look, everybody got paid the same on the movie. Like, Tom made as much as our PAs.
Nice.
Wow.
Everyone but me, annoyingly.
Yeah, you
didn't make anything.
Seems like that's always the case with the writer and the director and the producer of an indie project. You're not really doing it. I mean, obviously you'd like to see a paycheck, but you just want to see it get done, and it's a passion project, for sure.
If I was doing this, for economic reasons, I mean, I just don't see a world where I would even try. Obviously, I do this because I love it to a life-threatening degree.
Right.
I'm only 22. I'm not meant to be this gray. This is just the movie taking it out of me. No, I mean, look, it's wonderful, and it's also that stuff's really contagious when you're on set. Like, when the biggest star there is having as much of a blast as you and your dipshit friends who are just living out their childhood dreams. Like, it's
right.
It emanates, and it creates, like, it's a really, really wonderful atmosphere. And when you're trying to pull off an impossible movie, that's a serious commodity. That's a very important element of allowing you to pull off miracles, because everybody's keen. Everybody's like, you know what? I am going to push myself hard. Yes, we are in the middle of a heat wave. Yes, like, I've sweat through my clothes. Everything's itchy, but these guys are every department's knocking it out the park. Everybody's trying so hard, and it's just very, very pure. It was really magical. Like, I'll cherish this movie.
Do you
That's
have
amazing.
Any favorite behind the scenes moments working with Thomas that you can talk? Oh, you can talk about anything, but
I mean, there was one moment. I can't imagine anybody wants me to share this, but what are they going to do? There was one moment. I remember I was running back to our production trailer, and Thomas was there, and he was walking his adorable dog, and he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, girls." I go, "Hey, Tom, how you doing?" And he just came up and he said, "I just want you to know, I am having so much fun. This has been one of my favorite projects in a long time, and these are the kind of projects I love doing." And I had to do everything in my power to not just, like, cry and hug him, which I'm sure he would have let me, because he's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
And I was just it was so gratifying, because I was really, that's really important to me. I've worked on so many films in other departments, and I've worked for so many other filmmakers who had 10 times the budget I've ever had, and who are just making shit and treating people like shit.
Yeah.
And it's just inexcusable to be a cunt when you're working in such a wonderful arena.
Yeah.
And he echoed back that to me. And then even furthermore, I asked him, I was like, am I delusional, or is Clay really special? And Thomas was like, no, Clay's the real deal. Like, he's incredible. And I was like, good, because I've actually put a lot of eggs in that basket. So this is comforting to hear.
A lot of Hank's famous eggs in that basket.
Well, Well, and it's funny too because there's definitely times where Lieutenant Dangle from Reno 911 trickles in a little bit, especially the very end scene when the new owners of the cabin show up and
Yeah.
they pop out, and it's totally Lieutenant Dangle right there talking to him, and I just
Yeah.
laughed. I thought it was so endearing. It was great.
Yeah, I
He
think
is,
that was his last day on set as well. And and like as the shoot goes, people's chemistry gets better. Like so much of that is improvised.
Mm.
Thomas and Cameron both, just riffing, and it was such a joy that for that to be the last day with Thomas as well, because they were just popping off each other, and it just makes such a wonderful button at the end of the movie.
that's so cool to hear. Like Lieutenant Dangle, specifically the new boot goofin is something I think about. It plays in my head at least a couple times a day. It's so fucking iconic. So, and just hearing him being like, oh, he's like just a good energy on the set. That's just so cool to hear.
Man, he's great. Like again, it's some of my favorite moments in the movie. Like when he knocks on the door and he goes, "Oh, you guys playing games? You need a third?" And then Miles goes, "No games need a third, Hank." And he just goes, and he just thinks about it for a second. Like,
Yes.
and other actors would just be like, "Oh," or just do something else. But
Yeah.
Thomas is just he's so present, and he's so existing in the multitudes of this desperate, weird, confused guy. You just see him think and go, "No, I'm sure some games have a third. Maybe it doesn't sound. That's not real. That's not right." And even all the stuff about like, he's just meant to shut the door on him, and he goes, "Oh, I need to talk to Miles about the Gophers. It's the Gophers are mating." Nobody asked you to say that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. All the stuff about poaching the Wi-Fi. I'm around. Like that's just him.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just got to drop the reins and let the man cook.
Yeah. I mean, that was the idea for us. Like initially this was going to be a sort of a platform for improv for everybody. And then the more we wrote it and the more ambitious it got, I talked to Cameron and Clay, and I was like, look, Troyan can improv. Thomas will certainly improv. But you guys, let's do our improv before we show up, because we're not going to have the freedom, the luxury of minutes to spare to have you figuring shit out.
Yeah.
Like Thomas is going to come in with 3 decades of experience, 4, and knock it out the park. And like, I mean, I don't think we did more than 2 takes on damn near anything in the whole movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, how could we? 12 days.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Got to get it done.
But we didn't have to. Like, that's the beautiful thing is it's a lot of iterations of the script. It's Troy and Belisario and Thomas Lennon. They don't need more than a couple of takes, especially not when they've given you their time for a table read and they understand the characters. But like Thomas Lennon's, he's going to nail it the first take, and you give him another one so that if you sense that he's having fun, do you need it? No, definitely not. Like he's very, very good.
He's incredible. So let's talk about some favorites moment from the film. Do you have one that sticks out as like, that is my favorite thing? It doesn't have to be like the most grand or whatever, just for you, your favorite moment in the film.
There's so many subcategories of favorite.
Yeah.
This is so weird. One of my favorite little bits of physical comedy improv that I almost ruined the take because I didn't see it coming was when they do fart cops and they round the corner in the kitchen and Miles like shoots and then he wraps around to the other corner and then Clay ducks in and he bites out a grenade, throws and goes. He just does this like tiny fart explosion with his hands, and it's so infantile and stupid and ridiculous. And I just didn't see it coming. And I've been writing the fucking thing with him for like 2.5 years at this point. I was like, how is this clown still surprising me? But that little piece of physical brilliance. Also, bear in mind, like Clay hadn't been in a feature film before. Like the nerves you would expect to be overwhelming your creativity, they weren't present. He was holding I mean, that speaks to another one of my favorite moments. When he's alone on the couch with Hank and he's trying to like talk to him. So are you Demon Hank or who's in there? There was one take where Clay was just smiling the whole time. And I was like, okay, cut. Let me just have 2 minutes. And I took Clay aside and I was like, I know you're having fun and you're holding your own with Thomas Lennon. It's pretty cool, right? He's like, dude, this is so crazy. I was like, yeah, I know it's crazy, but also he's a demon and you're scared of him. So like, let's go back and just don't forget that.
Reel that joy in.
Yeah. And then and led again to one of my favorite improvs where he's like, as long as there's two of you in there, I guess you can take the carpool lane. And then Hank screams,
Yes.
and then he's like, okay. And he screams, and both of them and it just created this moment of hilarious chaos, which wasn't in the script. That line wasn't in the script. And that was, it's like seeing your buddy just get a chance to, I would use a sporting analogy. I'm not good at that, but step up to the plate and hit a homer, I believe. I've seen that in enough movies.
Nailed it.
So
yeah,
independent filmmaking is always a huge undertaking. I mean, I've dabbled in it. I've never done a feature. I've done several shorts, which are a chore in themselves. But what is something about making a movie like this that people don't realize until they actually try to do it?
I mean, I'll just answer just immediately what popped up into my head is, I think, timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we started writing the very first version of this probably at the end of 2021, and we ended up shooting it towards the end of 2024, and here we are in 2026, and it's finally coming out. Now, the film's been ready for a while, but I mean, I say that, but like, the version that people will see, like, I changed stuff in January of this year because we hadn't delivered yet to the aggregator. And I was like, okay, well, my kid's asleep. My wife's in bed. The dogs are all asleep. I've got time. I'm going to do the stuff I couldn't do before. So, you keep tinkering, and I was in a unique position to do that, but it's the timeline of it, like, you can be passionate about doing something. Can you be passionate about it for 5 years? Can you find the joy? Can you find a new video game for you to play at every new junction? Like, right now, we're distributing the movie ourselves, and that means marketing and PR, and like, so I have to find the joy in making a 6-second and an 8-second and a 10-second and a 15 and a 30. And then I have to find the joy in figuring out how to advertise on Meta and on Google, and learning about media buying and planning, and learning about foreign sales and dealing with the contracts. And, like, we gave equity in the movie to everybody involved. Anybody who had an earnest contribution to the movie gets a percentage. Now, a lot of it is a fraction of a percentage, but it's still something.
Yeah.
People will, even my PAs will be getting checks in the mail for their contribution to this movie. And I hope those checks are enough to buy anything, but there will be checks nonetheless, which is a really fun idea, but that also comes with a ton of paperwork and gathering everybody's ACH data and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And you have to find the same passion and same joy to see you over the finish line for us, which will be like, almost 5 years since we first put pen to paper. It's a long time.
Yeah.
So I just think people need to understand, and that's not to say it has to be that way, obviously, but like, you got to do it because you can't not do it. You got to do it because there is a very loud noise in your head that won't let you get a more stable job that has healthcare.
I mean, that kind of answered my next question. And I think that's so important. Because if someone was listening, they're like, hey, I want to be a filmmaker. What's some advice you'd want to give them? It's like, I feel like that's it right there, where you can't just be passionate. Like, it's easy to be passionate about something for a couple months, but to hold that passion for fucking years and to have to wear all the different hats that you are currently wearing, like, that's just incredible.
I mean, look, I'm certainly not unique in wanting to do this every waking moment.
Right.
And also, like, bear in mind that this film got this big because more and more people got interested, and then, stars attached to your movie, and suddenly it's a more bankable concept. But we worked very, very hard to make sure, like, the money stayed low. Like, we actually went into shooting, we only had $235,000, and then after we wrapped, we managed to get up to 296 is where we're at now. And now we're getting a couple more tens of thousands, which will probably take us to around the 315, 320 area, which will cover marketing and distribution costs, deliverables. And it swelled because it had to. It outgrew the bounds of where it was at. Now, if you want to make a movie, you don't have to do that by any means. And we could have made this movie a lot smaller. And look, everything really has gotten harder. There are more people on the planet, more than wanting to make movies. There are more platforms to get your movies seen. There are people who are blowing up off TikTok or Vine or whatever the hell else. And you can scream into the void and complain about it, or you can just do this thing because, again, that noise, the voices in your head. But the options for doing that have never been better. Like, as I said, I did one of the most ambitious 3D shots of this movie with an app on my phone that I pay $60-something a year to have. And I used Blender, which is open source and free. It's I found the video game, like I had a blast doing it. And, what would be my advice to people doing this stuff? I would say, make yourself a sandbox that you can actually shine in. Like, put yourself in a situation. Like I remember coming up, I had so many friends. I'm sure you guys had the same. They're like, I want to make Heat. I want to make Taken. It's like, cool, man.
Yeah.
You don't have any money and you're not going to shut down a street. Hell, you don't even have good actors. So like, just make yourself a sandbox that you can actually shine in. And that's what we really tried to do in this movie. And even when it got bigger, it stayed small. And moreover, like, I plan like a maniac, mainly because I've been on so many crews where I've been taken advantage of, and I show up on set, the director's like, how do we cover this? And I know like Spielberg does that, but Spielberg's got millions of fucking dollars. If you're showing up on a tiny little movie and every minute costs money, show up prepared. Like, I did 6 drafts of the storyboards. I did 3D scans of the locations. I recreated my storyboards in 3D. I made an animatic so my whole crew could watch this truly heinous version of the movie. And then everybody's kind of on the same page so that when you're showing up for your finite filming days, like, you're at least all kind of dancing to the same rhythm. And when things have to change, you can all change together rather than showing up and being like, I have to do what and put lights where? Like, why didn't we do a scout? Why? There's just these little things you can do to prepare to set yourself up for success is really all it boils down to. Like, we wrapped early 5 of our days, and on a 12-day shoot, that's insane.
Yeah.
But we prepared.
Yeah.
Right. So, obviously we're a horror podcast, so we have to ask, as a horror fan yourself, what are some of the movies that really kind of help shape your love of the genre?
Man,
I'd say that's probably an impossible question, but
well, no, I mean, but there's a lot of answers to that are not present in Weekend at the End of the World. There's if you want me to answer relative to Weekend at the End of the World, that's a sub genre of those answers. I mean, again, like, I'm a sucker for genre mashups. I'm a sucker for things that really, really merge. And separate from being influences on this film, just by themselves, I thought Shaun of the Dead and Cabin in the Woods were just 2 absolutely breathtaking, incredible films. I know this is such a weird answer, but the John Landis extended music video for Thriller absolutely fucked me up as a child. And it was really the duality of wide-eyed, sweet Michael Jackson and then bulging eyes dancing Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And just the way I was almost being like hypnotically forced to have fun with this incredibly wacky, cool choreography and terrifying special effects makeup that haunted me and made me run out of the room. That always like really, really stuck in my mind. And there's just so many that affect me in different ways. Like,
sure,
Event Horizon.
Oh, that's a
Event
great
Horizon.
movie.
Wow.
It affected me so profoundly because it was sci-fi horror in a way that, for me personally, I'm fascinated by the prospect of what's beyond our capacity to understand a reality, a realm, a dimension. So like, I guess you do see that a bit in Weekend in the sense that like, the allness isn't parallel dimensions where there's a Carl who has a mustache. The allness is
Right.
meant to be like the ligaments, the sinew between realities themselves, almost like this primordial ooze. And that like infinite threat and also like wild curiosity that I also felt in Event Horizon. Like when they talk about the realm they went to of this impossible suffering, I was like, I don't ever want to go there, but I really want to know what the fuck is happening there. That is crazy. That is so outside of the human experience that it piqued my fascination.
Right. Right.
So on our show, we have a little segment at the end where we look at the movie and like, how screwed are we? Would we be able to survive? I want you to look at your movie, your apocalyptic situation you have created. You get plopped right there in the middle. You fucked? Are you gonna make it through? How you doing?
I mean, it's a very, very silly movie and it hinges on, the manipulation of somebody not self-actualizing in the face of like basically not growing up. And I am certainly guilty of having lifelong obligatory friends who, our mutual friends have since been like, no, dude, I don't speak to him anymore. He won't grow up. And I'm like, yeah, but that's funny. That's his appeal. Um, I don't, I'm not easily conned. Would I survive in the allness itself? Who's to say?
Right.
I certainly would fare better than our heroes because my attention span can be measured in more than seconds. But who knows, man? Anything can happen in the allness.
Yeah.
You don't want, you look the wrong way and Quiddle gets scared and gets up inside you and it's curtains.
Yeah. Totally. Oh boy, we are talking with Gille Klabin, writer, producer, and director of Weekend at the End of the World. Now, this release is coming up here in April. Where will people be able to find Weekend at the End of the World when it comes out?
So it's going to come out on all the standard VOD platforms: iTunes, Apple, Google, YouTube, and Voodoo, Fandango. I believe that one as well.
Great.
So it'll be available there, and then that'll be the first window of distribution. We'll see basically how that goes. And I'm just like we're not a studio, we're not beholden to opening box office or anything like that. So we're really going to let this go organically. But the trajectory will just be like available on all the platforms. It'll be available to rent for a while. We might negotiate a streaming deal for SVOD to be the first place you'll be able to watch it for free, and then after that it'll go to AVOD. So it'll be on Tubi and Zumo and Voodoo when it extends into AVOD, and I think Amazon does an AVOD thing as well. And then we'll see, and look, if our marketing works and people find it and there's demand, we're going to have all the data, which is the beautiful part of it. So if I see that people in Portland are crazy about the movie, we can put up a poll on our Instagram and say, hey, would like to come and see it in the theater with its full 5.1 mix and 4K DCP? And they say yes, then we'll rent out a theater and we'll take the show on the road.
Nice. Well, and if you do that in Portland, Michael and I will definitely make a road trip. It's just up the freeway from us, and we'd love to see this on the big screen. Absolutely. Yeah.
Man, it's it's a treat. Like I'm just so proud of everybody. And Aaron Grasso, who has been my cinematographer for 15 years, it's rare when your longtime collaborator can surprise you, but sometimes he would light something up and I'd just be like, damn, like, how in the fuck did you do that? That is unreasonably beautiful for our circumstances.
So I guess finally, what do you hope horror fans take away from your movie when it comes out and they're able to see it?
I mean, look, this movie was made with the simple intention of being something that you like watch on a Sunday with your friends, that you want to have a fun time and you don't want to see everything coming. And I really, in my loftiest of ambitions, I would love people to just, finish that movie and say, well, shit, that was fun. And also, I didn't see that coming. Like, I hope the weird shit we put in there catches you off guard. I hope the fear works. I hope the turns that the characters take aren't too predictable. And I hope you have a blast. And, next time you're interacting with a boiled egg or a Fireball whiskey or gummy bears or a raccoon pelt hat, like these just little things pop into your mind. My dream of dreams is to be walking the street once during Halloween and see somebody dressed as one of our characters. That would be incredible.
Hell yeah.
Right. Well, Gil, this was just an absolute blast. Again, the movie is called Weekend at the End of the World. Comes out next month, and Michael and I just had such a blast watching the movie and then getting to talk to you about it to get the inside scoop on this. And I can't speak for Michael, but I'm going to. I think after the film comes out, we would love to have you come back and bring whoever you want with you back to Opening Kill, where we can actually break the movie down like we do with all of the other movies we feature each week. I think that would be a lot of fun. So I'll throw that invite out to you.
Count on it, guys. I've had such a lovely time. It's, there's nothing more rewarding than having people watch the movie you slave over making. And it's so great to speak to you guys who are such like a passionate, attentive audience. And you love movies as much as I love movies. I would argue potentially more. Like, and my memory of movies when I watch them, I'm like, I'll watch a movie and be like, that was fun, and I'll forget exactly what I just went through, which is not the best skill set to have. But no, this has just been such a pleasure, and it's incredibly rewarding. I don't make these movies in a vacuum to watch by myself. I make it to share with people, and in the hopes that they had half as much nice things to say as y'all have said, and it really means a lot to me.
Yeah, well, thank you, and congratulations on the film. You should be proud. It's really fun.
Thank you, man. Yeah. I'm proud of our little movie, and I'm very proud of everybody involved, and I'm desperately excited to share it with the world.
Hell yeah.
Gille Klabin, writer, producer, director of Weekend at the End of the World.
Opening Kill is produced by Mystic Cloud Productions and hosted by Brian O'Connor and Michael Duran. New episodes drop every Thursday wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And don't forget, you can watch the video versions on YouTube. See you next time, if you survive the opening kill.